Jujutsu Kaisen's got a reputation for killing off characters left and right, so just how many of them actually matter? Today I'll be answering that question and telling you all you need to know about the deaths that actually made a difference, starting with number 1, Rika Orimoto. As Yuta's childhood friend and crush, Rika's death was the result of a tragic accident that scarred Yuta in more ways than one. Because her death was so sudden and unexpected, it left Yuta in a state of shock and denial. This, combined with his latent potential as a Jutsu sorcerer, caused Rika's spirit to be cursed and bound to Yuta himself in the form of the Queen of Curses. Now, is it sad that Rika had to be a vengeful spirit for years after dying because of Yuta's mistake? Yes. But did it give him one hell of an OP summon that carried him till he could become a beast in his own right? Yes. So it's really up for interpretation, but I'd say it was worth it. Unlike Rika though, who ultimately gets to pass on with closure. Number 2, Riko Amanai dies alone and out of nowhere. The poor girl gets no-scoped through the skull by Toji using an honest-to-God Glock, and right after one of the most heartwarming scenes in the series. Suguru Geto had just promised that he and Gojo would take her side no matter what, so she could live her own life, and half a second later, her brain splattered on the concrete. And while her death wasn't the most significant in the grand scheme of things, it was the beginning of the end for number 3, Suguru Geto. Once one of the greatest sorcerers of his generation alongside Gojo, Riko's death was the first of many steps on his path towards the darkness. Between the death he saw and having the ability to literally eat curses, he was constantly exposed to the worst humanity had to offer, until he got sick and tired of how twisted humanity is and became a Frieza follower. Believing all non-sorcerers to be inferior monkeys, he defected and strove to create a new world order where those with power reign supreme. The only problem with that is he squared up against the wrong twink and his yandere cursed girlfriend. During the events of the Night Parade of 100 Demons, Suguru tried to kill Yuta and steal Rika's power, only for Yuta and his friends to work together and blast his racist ass to smithereens. Suguru's death was a quiet one, marked by a final conversation with Gojo where they got some level of closure, except Suguru's body was never laid to rest. In death, he became a new vessel for Kenjaku, and it's through this vessel that Kenny enacts his plans throughout the rest of the series, manipulating everything for the return of Sukuna. It's hard to say how much longer it would have taken Kenjaku to complete his plans without Suguru's body, but either way, his death was key to the body snatcher schemes that almost nobody saw coming, except number 4, Wasuke Itadori, father of Jin, grandfather of Yuji, and father-in-law of Kenjaku. Yeah, it gets weird. So Wasuke was Yuji's paternal grandpa, and while it's not overtly stated, the series heavily hints that he knew something about Yuji's mom, specifically that she was actually Kenjaku piloting a corpse, going as far as to take the Itadori family backshots to birth Sukuna's perfect vessel. Despite him knowing this, Wasuke never actually tried to reveal the truth to anyone, instead giving his son a cryptic warning about women with stitches on their head. Maybe if he'd actually tried to communicate better, he wouldn't have died alone in a hospital bed with nobody but his underage grandson to give a crap. Anticlimactic as it was, Wasuke's death drove Yuji to take a closer look at how he'd been living his life, and more importantly, it's what convinced him he didn't want to go out the same way. So he decided that he'd help as many people as possible so he'd have a livelier funeral one day, which is more than can be said for number 5, Nagi Yoshino. Also known to Yuji as his friend's hot mom, I said what I said. Despite only meeting her once, it was obvious to Yuji that Nagi was a great person and parent, truly loving her son. Unfortunately for her, Mahito figured that out as well. Without a second thought, he orchestrated her death and manipulated the situation to his advantage, twisting the son she loved into a puppet for his own enjoyment. The son in question, number 6, Junpei Yoshino, would follow in his mom's footsteps not even a full 2 days later, as Mahito's plans became clearer. After tricking Junpei into becoming a cursed user and hurting innocents, Mahito turned him against Yuji himself. At this point, Yuji hated Mahito plenty for how he toyed with the lives of others, but what he did to Junpei just cemented it. As soon as Junpei seemed to be coming around, Mahito stepped in, turned him into a stuffed animal, and made his last moments ones of suffering. As a viewer, it was a jarring and unexpected death. To Yuji though, it was a can of gasoline that fueled the flame of hatred for Mahito within him. Junpei is far from the last friend Mahito steals from Yuji, but he was the first one, and the ice-cold hatred for Yuji's soul started with his death. Plus, it gave us one of the hardest rage scenes in modern anime. Number 7, Kechizu and Iso. Now, spoiler warning for anyone who's not caught up to the anime, but Kechizu and Iso are actually, technically, the half-brothers of Yuji himself. Basically, Kenjaku's got a lot of kids running around, and these guys are 2 of them, along with their older brother, Choso. Of course, none of the involved parties know about this when they first meet, specifically during the operation to steal Sukuna's fingers from Jutsu High, an operation which ended with both Kechizu and Iso being killed by Nobara and Yuji respectively. At the same time, it was just another fight to all of them, but these these deaths come into play much later when Choso realizes the truth, when he learns that Kenjaku set them up to fight their own brother, Yuji, and ultimately die. Choso switches up and joins Yuji's side, refusing to lose any more of his family. Speaking of irrelevant loved ones who barely had any screen time, number 8, Yu Haibara. If you're wondering who that is, well, that's not your fault. Haibara's not exactly a major character. In fact, that's kind of the whole point. He was one of the Jujutsu High students who was in the same batch as Nanami, Gojo, and the gang, and his death was completely unceremonious. He was there one day, and the next, he died off screen on a mission because his target strength level had been misjudged. Despite his limited screen time though, it's clear that Haibara was a treasured friend for those who stood with him. His death served as a warning and reminder to them all, never to take their job lightly or their life for granted. So much so that he even shows up in the death flashback of another character we'll talk about later. But first, number 9, Kokichi Muta, or Mechamaru. When it comes to heavenly restrictions, Kokichi Muta drew the shortest end of the stick possible. In exchange for a large amount of cursed energy and control, he was given a body that was in constant pain for his entire life, confining him to a bloody tub in an isolation chamber. So it's really no surprise that when the opportunity presented itself to get a healthy body, he took it, even making a binding vow with Mahito and Kenjaku for it, mainly because he'd made plans to beat them beforehand. As soon as his body was healed, he put everything on the line to kill them then and there, and with the giant mech he piloted, it seemed he'd actually succeed. Ultimately though, Kokichi lost the fight and his life, though he still had a backup plan in place for that. Even in death, he helped his allies through recorded messages. Through these, he warned them of Kenjaku, the planning of something massive on the 31st of October, and the involvement of the prison realm. And while the higher-ups ignored this info, it allowed Urahime's group to act faster and intervene in the Shibuya incident, arriving in time to support Yuji and the others. Speaking of the Shibuya incident, the bad guys see their own share of deaths during that, starting with number 10, Hanami. Essentially the poison ivy of the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, Hanami's whole gimmick is being mad at how humanity mistreats nature. In season 1, Hanami's the one used as target practice for Gojo's Hollow Purple, showing us just how high the Honored One's raw destructive potential is. And then in season 2, Gojo uses his infinity to crush Hanami into a fine paste against a wall, before turning to Jogo with rape eyes. Going down in the earliest stages of the Shibuya incident, Hanami's death is purely a flex from Gojo, showing how easily he can kill even natural disaster level curses, a habit that he picked up all the way back when he was still a student and caught his first body. Number 11, Toji Fushiguro. At the time, Gojo had every reason to rage at Toji and kill him for revenge. After all, he not only killed Gojo that same day, but he even killed Amanai, who he'd come to care for. The reality is though, Gojo was higher than a kite on his own curse energy, and his outright murder of Toji was just him trying out his new ultimate move, Hollow Purple. Ultimately, Toji's final battles and death were the push Gojo needed to finally learn RCT and break past his own limits. It's only because Toji killed him that he didn't die, as ridiculous as that sounds, and it's what made him the force of nature he later became. But of course, this wasn't the last time Toji showed up to brutalize someone, because during the Shibuya incident, he saves his son and his friends from, number 12, Dagon. Starting as a cute little mascot, Dagon quickly evolved into a Cthulhu wannabe once his domain expansion was finalized. In this domain, Nanami, Naobito, and Maki were all at his mercy, completely unable to gain any ground. It was a moment that pointed out just how glaringly fast the curses could outpace the sorcerer's evolution if given the chance. But Dagon was ultimately killed just as embarrassingly as Hanami, because thanks to Megumi breaking into the curse's domain, his deadbeat dad was able to hog the action and beat the shit out of Dagon. The second he busts in there, the sorcerers are turned into spectators. Toji takes over the fight, takes Maki's weapon, sharpens it into a makeshift shank, and turns Dagon into sashimi in record time. And to think all that badassery would have never been seen if not for, number 13, Granny Ogami, who died because of her own arrogance. With the ability to summon a dead person's information and stick it into someone else's body to use, you'd think this old hag would be pretty OP. And you'd be right, but the deadbeat dad with the gambling addiction is just that much more OP. As soon as Toji's info is put into her grandson's body, his sheer force of will allows him to take control. Not only that, he purposely interprets her order to kill all the sorcerers in the area, as including her, allowing him to smack her into a grave and free himself of her control. Her death's sheer stupidity is matched only by those of Geto students. Number 14, Mimiko and Nanako Hasaba. While everything around them was going to hell during the Shibuya incident, these two geniuses decided to try and negotiate a deal with the Sukuna. In exchange for one of his fingers, they wanted him to kill the imposter using Suguru's body. Unsurprisingly, Sukuna was less than impressed and literally off the brats for their arrogance, and annoyed as he was by the whole thing, he went right on to then kill, number 15, Jogo. But not before making a game of the whole thing. Knowing the hot-headed curse doesn't hold a candle to him, he offers Jogo a deal, entertain him and Sukuna will be his underling, or die. What follows is Jogo tweaking the fuck out while Sukuna constantly flexes on him throughout Shibuya. The whole city is a flaming hellscape by the time they're done, and Sukuna remains completely untouched. It's a humiliating defeat for Jogo, and even more than that, it's a display of Sukuna's absolute superiority. More importantly though, it gives way to Jogo's dying delusion, blessing us with the "stand proud, you're strong" meme, which sadly is his most memorable contribution to the show. Unlike him though, number 16, Nanami Kento, will always have a special place in the hearts of the fans, even if it's only because of that scene. Unfortunately, Nanami too met his end during the Shibuya incident, and he fell at the hands of none other than Mahito. After getting deep fried, ganged up on, beat up, and tired out, Nanami was at the end of his rope when he came face to face with Mahito. He just didn't have it in him anymore to keep up the fight, especially when Mahito had already made physical contact with him. Knowing that his time was up, Nanami could practically see his old friend, Haibara, calling him to the other side. With a smile on his face and faith in Yuji to take care of things, he felt his body being transfigured and blown apart in real time by Mahito. Despite being one of the only sorcerer casualties that night, Nanami's death was a massive blow to the students of Jujutsu High especially, so it's fitting that the next death that night was number 17, Mahito. Not at the hand of Todo or Yuji, but his own ally, Kenjaku. Well, that's how it ended at least, though even if Kenjaku hadn't stepped in, Yuji was more than ready to end Mahito's existence then and there. After a hard-fought battle where Jujutsu High's resident brothers put the beat down on Mahito, Yuji had him crawling on his hands and knees, literally crying for his life, and yet ultimately, Kenjaku team killed him. Stepping onto the scene, he uses a curse technique of Geto's body to seal up Mahito and consume him like a power-up, ending his pitiful existence. Unfortunately, the lives taken by the Shibuya incident weren't limited to the night itself, as number 18, Masamichi Yaga, was ordered to be executed by the higher-ups of Jujutsu Society. Why? Simply because he supposedly played a role in Satoru Gojo and Suguru Geto becoming the threats that they now were. It's stupid, pointless, and an all-around harmful decision, which fits perfectly with what's known about the higher-ups. However, one good thing does come out of Yaga's death. In his final moments, executed by old man Gakuganji, he reveals the secrets of his cursed corpse creation technique to him. When asked why he's revealing this now after keeping it secret for so long, Yaga tells Gakuganji that this information is a curse from one principle to another. Upon learning of Yaga's technique and more, Gakuganji grows to regret following the order of his execution. Ultimately, it's the change of heart from Yaga's death that shifts Gakuganji's character later on, making him far more of an ally to the students and Gojo than he was in the past. Speaking of those students, number 19, Mai Zanin, loses her life not long after Yaga during the perfect preparation arc. The whole thing is as messed up as it can get. Mai and Maki are twin sisters born to the heartless Ogi Zanin and are seen as a burden by their father. Believing them to be holding him back, Ogi plots with the higher-ups to frame them for trying to unseal Gojo from the prison realm and execute them as punishment. It was in this attempt that he cut down both his daughters and left them for dead in a warehouse. What he didn't expect was for Mai to make the ultimate sacrifice. See, as twins, Mai and Maki count as one person in the Jujutsu world, and as such, any cursed energy either of them has counts as belonging to them both. So since Mai has cursed energy, Maki's heavenly restriction doesn't grant her the same level of power as Toji's did, despite the condition being the same. And so, despite their differences, when faced with an impossible situation, Mai decides to free her sister. By pushing her own power past its limits, she puts enough strain on her body for it to die, taking her cursed energy out of the picture and leaving Maki with truly 0 CE. Because of this, her heavenly restriction is finally able to reach its full potential, putting Maki on par with Toji in his prime. It's with this very power that Maki goes on to annihilate, number 20, the whole goddamn Zanin clan, as revenge for her sister and to free herself of the trauma and oppression they suffered at the clan's hands. With her heavenly restriction finally unrestricted, Maki spins the block, gets her get back, and destroys the Zanin clan. The only truly memorable member Maki killed was her cousin Naoya, and even that's just because the dude was a sexist with a superiority complex. And while his death is more than welcome, there is no greater tragedy than the loss of, number 21, Yuki Tsukumo, the hottest woman on the show. On paper, Yuki's one of the most impressive and powerful sorcerers in the world, with the ability to grant herself virtual mass and deliver devastating hits. Paired with her RCT mastery, a Shikigami partner, and ridiculous base stats, she should be unstoppable, especially considering she's Todo's inspiration and one of the most hyped up characters in the series. Yet despite all this, she dies in the first real fight she's seen in, against Kenjaku. With her final attack, she basically turns into a black hole and forces Kenjaku to reveal all his cards, including anti-gravity curse technique. Though her death was a wasted one, Yuki's passing brought the sorcerers one massive step closer to understanding and ultimately defeating Kenjaku. Speaking of who, number 22, Kenjaku, finally dies in the Shinjuku Showdown arc, and for all his detailed scheming and convoluted plans, his death is one of the simplest ones possible. He's distracted for a moment by Takaba, and Yuto Okotsu sweeps in to slice his head off. Just like that, hundreds of years of manipulation, chaos, and bloodshed are put to an end. With Kenjaku's death, one of the key players was removed, paving the way to a better tomorrow. A tomorrow that, number 23, Satoru Gojo, was never able to see in person, because he also dies in Shinjuku. By now, we've all seen enough memes, rants, and crash outs online to know how it went down. Gojo is packing up Sukuna, Agito, Mahoraga, and Gege all at the same time by himself. If only he hadn't dropped his guard right at the end. With Gojo's guard down, Sukuna grabbed the opportunity to put his plan into motion. Throughout that fight, he'd been using Mahoraga's adaptation to create a technique that can bypass infinity. In those final moments of the fight where Gojo looked like he'd won, Sukuna finally fired off his cleave, combined with Mahoraga's adaptation to slice through Gojo like hot butter. With his death, the status quo of the Jututsu world itself collapsed. Since his birth, Gojo was akin to a single man holding up an entire planet. His existence alone kept the world's curses in check. With his passing, the situation became truly hopeless in everyone's eyes, as it established Sukuna's superiority. How could any of them beat the monster that took down Gojo? And yet, it forced the students to grow. It pushed them further, faster than ever before. And when the time ultimately came, they learned from the error of placing all the burden on one set of shoulders alone. Every one of them put something forward to help with the final battle, and when it was down to the wire, Yuji finally brought down, number 24, Sukuna. Combining everything he's learned on the battlefield, Yuji battered away at Sukuna after everyone else had already taken their turns. While he did that, a recovered Nobara uses her CT on Sukuna's final finger, activating resonance. Together, Gojo's remaining students finally brought an end to his killer, and saved his third from himself. After centuries of being the boogeyman of the Jujutsu world, Sukuna was reduced to a single fleshy blob of a curse, alone and defeated. His end ushered in a new era for the world of sorcery, an era hopefully unmarked by blatant plot devices like binding vows, which you can learn more about in this video.